Hey people, welcome back to the channel. This is a story in which Madara is Naruto's grandfather. He implanted his and Hashirama's cells into Naruto and trained him, which made him extremely strong. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video, leave a comment if you want to suggest fanfic. Check the description for credits and support the creator of the story. So let us begin. Chapter 43 Inches The great emperor who never sets a foot outside the comfort of his humble palace, Yugao started in a tone dripping with mild sarcasm. She was walking into the throne room, alone. Yugao. Naruto acknowledged the woman's presence, but took no interest in her sarcastic remark as he had grown accustomed to hearing such things from other people. On a good day, even he let loose of a streak of sarcastic remarks. Today, this woman beat him to the flag, but he minded it not since there was no harm done. What brings you here? Now I need a reason to be here. Naruto merely gave the woman a blank stare. Every time she came here, it was always on some matter. She never just came here just to see his health or to amuse him. Of course, with a record like that, it was only natural that he ask what reason had brought her before him. You're actually a manipulative person, aren't you, Naruto? Naruto arched a brow at the question, more like a statement really. No one had ever come to him and said those words so bluntly, so he was a little surprised to hear them from Yugao of all people who knew him. What gives you the idea, Yugao? Why don't you do anything about the impending issue, Naruto? The situation with other nations wasn't all that smiles towards his empire, and yet he didn't do anything about the matter. He had specifically ordered Hisuke not to strengthen or prepare their forces for war, but to continue training and living as though they would be no war to fight. He didn't go outside the country to diffuse the flames that were starting out because of the growth of the kingdom. Surely, since it was his empire, he should have a say or do something to diffuse the situation. But he did nothing, except to sit around the throne for most time of the day. She didn't understand why he did something like that at first. She thought it was no different than him being hidden inside his sky palace, out of everyone's reach. At least while up there, no one would even attempt to assassinate him as they couldn't reach him. But in here, it opened opportunities for his death. Even so, he did nothing to show the world that he was still that same man who could destroy an army in a matter of seconds. He was still powerful, but he acted like he'd grown weak, giving his enemies a false hope. Gaara, Mei and Gurren are handling it, why should I take their job? He had assigned the three to handle the situation outside the empire, so it was only natural for the three to be focused on settling things than him doing their job. You know very well that Gaara and Mei put all their efforts in the matter. Yugao didn't deny it, but did note that he didn't say anything about Nagato, who was also a vital part of the empire. It wasn't a mistake on his part and it was as he said it, only Mei and Gaara put all efforts in changing the situation in the outside, without getting any help from His Imperial Majesty. He allowed them to do what they wanted, offering nothing to help, but only putting his input where asked. She recognized that Nagato wasn't putting all stops in helping the situation, his efforts were spent in the Rain country. Yes, that is true, but failure has been their achievement in the past years and you've yet to play your part in anything. Tell me, are you simply waiting for the kind of situation that you can impose yourself? Yugao waited expectantly, for a few moments until Naruto offered his response. Wouldn't you agree that sending Mei and Gaara to do the talking is the best option? I have little patience in dealing with ignorant fools and I'm not actually suited for diplomatic and politics. My role is more of a warrior than a smooth talker, he preferred actions more than words. So far his actions didn't say he wanted to pick a fight with any nations, but wanted to rest in peace within his palace. There wasn't even an underlying plot within the walls of his palace. The actions spoke a clear message and his words were already delivered. Possibly, but that makes my point. Diffusing things isn't your specialty. Destroying things and creating new things is what you're good at, Yugao said, emphasizing the words, destroy and create. Like I said, a world filled with battles is your kind of world. I'm not all good with hints and subtle gestures, but are you saying that I prefer to be in a chaos-filled world than a peaceful world? Or are you saying that I don't care about the results of both Mei and Gara, but lying here waiting for chaos to finally fill the world so I can do what I do best? Yugao gave the emperor a blank stare. What a thought you have of me, Yugao, Naruto concluded, looking slightly amused. Tell me, emperor, why haven't you done anything regarding the situation with other villages? You and I know it well that if you don't do anything, a war will arise. I have seen the horrors of war, I know how much pain it brings, and I don't wish to live through one again if it can be stopped from happening. You once told me that you didn't want a war, but if things continue this way, we will have a war. So why aren't you doing anything? Anyone who didn't want a war would be pulling all stops to prevent it from happening. That was the logical and rational way of doing things. But Naruto was basically doing nothing. He was merely watching like it was all just show. But this was reality, and his men would die in a war that he could have stopped. No matter how strong you were, in war, you always lost something. It was the nature of war. You don't go into a bloodbath and return without the smell of blood all over your body. If Naruto had a heart in him, if he wished for this country of his to live through to the next generation without having experienced the horrors of war, he would pull all strings to stop the damn war from happening. She didn't know what other nations were thinking, but she was concerned about him, and the people that she'd grown to care for. If she'd been the one running the show, she would never be resting, never be sitting on her throne like everything was alright while enemies plotted to kill her and disrupt the peace she'd brought. I did say that I didn't want a war, but I never said I would stop one from occurring, Naruto stated in a simple manner. Besides, I said a lot of things back then, but when I settled fully on this throne, I realized that a war is a necessity, but it will be on my terms. Yugao narrowed her eyes. You're manipulative, Naruto. You never intended for Mei and Gaara to bring peace. You had reasons for giving Nagato power, bringing back Obito and sending him off to Konoha to do as he likes. You know that Sasuke only comes here to get information, but you do nothing. Never intended. That isn't quite right, Yugao. You see, I'm not particularly interested in bringing peace to the shinobi world. However, I do like a world that isn't filled with violence. Gaara and Mei were allowed to work with what they believed because I gave their ideas a chance. But that failed, certainly, you can't fault me, Gaara and Mei, for the failure. I gave nothing for the course, but 2 cages, working in the court of the emperor were more than enough. I won't move around wiping drools of those fools, and I will not beg for them to stop with their plots. I warned that I wouldn't let it slide if he dared attack my country, the same as for Onoki. Mei and Gaara held talks with them, but they didn't listen. You're being ignorant of the fact that the omnipresent sage went to Kumogakure in all his glory and, nicely, told I that he wouldn't attack his village nor even attempt to overthrow him. Kuretsuchi was here, I told her the same thing. More to that, I even lit up some fireworks for A, but he didn't listen. Should I repeat what I told him a couple of years ago? The only thing that makes those people uneasy is my continued existence, and I know that they won't listen to anything until the emperor is dead. Do not delusion yourself into thinking that I will make such a sacrifice. If it is a fight they want, it is a fight the emperor will give them. Yugao already knew Naruto wouldn't go the same path as his parents. Still, a part of her truly believed that if he does move out of his palace and actually hold formal talks with those people, along with Mei and Gaara, something good would be worked. Konoha would be the exception. She didn't believe that those villagers would allow him entry into the village. She wouldn't even be surprised if some prayed every day that he would just drop dead. They'd probably even stone him if he walked into Konoha. So you're saying that you've done more than enough. You talked to Kuretsuchi, and even warned the former. After that, you sent Mei and Gaara, Yugao started. What a pity your efforts have been for nothing. Sarcasm doesn't really sweet you, Yugao. Can you blame me, Naruto? Naruto offered no response to the question. He stood up from his throne, and took a few steps before he was on level floor with Yugao. You know, even though I'm indifferent towards killing, I have no thirst for blood and have no desire to be a tyrant. However, I will do what I must to ensure that no one stands in the way of my idea of living my life in harmony. Yugao watched him as he started walking again. He stood just in front of her. Why did you come here, Yugao? You'd said you couldn't leave Konoha for me, but you have left it. I'm still curious, what is it that brought you here? Is it me? Do you just wish to live normally while criticizing me? I cannot answer that question, for now at least. Naruto nodded and walked past her. Are you going somewhere? Princess Koyuki has invited me to join her in the hot springs so many times, and each time I turned her down. I thought it'd be better to join her today. Do you wish to follow? No, Yugao said. So when you finally leave the throne, it is to go play romance with the princess. Naruto stopped walking and turned his head a little. I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that. It is a pity that you can't join me, though. He looked up at the ceiling before asking, I have never asked, how is the civilian life? Are you asking because you care or just because the thought pooped in your head and you suddenly felt like asking? Yugao didn't actually mean to say those words, but she couldn't help it. How long has she been living inside the capital? Since then, he never asked the question, nor bothered to even ask her health or even visit her, and that didn't make her happy at all. Does it matter why I asked, Yugao? I questioned because I want to know, and I sense some resentment from you. Is there something wrong I have done? His tone didn't change, and since he wasn't directly looking at her, Yugao couldn't guess whether he was just saying it or not. But then again, this was the emperor, he didn't have time to just say things. Yugao shook her head. Naruto, we were in a relationship, at least that is what I like to call it. You don't do what you did, and you certainly don't treat me as you did after the breakup. She would have liked it if he kept some contact with her. She had accepted that some things about him would never change, but it's been some time now, and he could have at least done something to show that he once cared. Naruto was silent for a few moments before finally responding. I apologize for that, he said, quietly. My relationship with you was a failure because I did not treat things as though we were in a relationship. I didn't try to connect, nor did I try to have fun with you. Ultimately, I was a bad person to you, even though I cared. To say that Yugao was shocked was an understatement. She was rendered completely speechless. She never thought she would hear proud emperor admitting that he treated her like crap and apologize at the same time. The woman blinked a few times as she tried to restart her brain. Was he just waiting for her to start the topic before he could say those words? If he acknowledged it all along, why didn't he say anything? I am happy that you have come, though, he said before looking away from the purple-haired woman. Samui, he called. Yugao narrowed her eyes when the blonde woman appeared in a blur at Naruto's left side. She hadn't sensed that woman's presence in the throne room. Was she here all along? Naruto shook his head slightly. No, he said. She was in her room. He took a few steps forward along with Samui. Before they could leave, Samui turned to give Yugao a small smile before they disappeared. Rice country. Railway, this is a pleasant surprise, Sasuke said mildly, looking at the relaxed emperor. I never actually thought I would see the emperor boarding a train his empire built, since he could teleport to anywhere he pleases. Arrangements on this train were already made. The train had a compartment for the emperor solely. It was like the highest class within the train. But ever since it was built, Naruto had never boarded a train before because he doesn't travel. This train was often used by people of his council, who were welcome to use the space. This train could almost move throughout the elemental nations, and it was damn faster than anything. Sasuke was greatly surprised to see this man moving on a train, headed to Sunagaku. To think that he would sit through the hours while the train sped through countries towards the destination, while he could simply teleport to Sunagaku in just seconds. But the fact that he was doing something like this meant that he was on the move, or at least, it was just for show, just to reveal to the shinobi nations that he was still alive. Aside from some people inside the capital, many hadn't even seen him in the past years. Sasuke was leaning against the entrance to the compartment, looking at Naruto, who was looking outside through the window. He was sitting comfortably on the left side of the train. The man hadn't even bothered to look at him when he sensed his presence. Of course, Sasuke didn't mind that at all. He'd seen Naruto do all kinds of annoying and frustrating things, that included outright ignoring his presence. But he always knew that the man was listening. Is it that much of a surprise that I am inside this transport? He still continued to look outside the window. Despite never using one before, he was the one to acquire the village hidden in Spring's technology and train blueprints, and he was the one who had the trains built. including roots, it was only natural that one day he take his turn in moving by this transport that was only operated by his kingdom within the elemental nations. A little, Sasuke said. What is surprising is that you left your beloved throne and are actually going to another village, something you haven't done in a long time. What really brought this on? Sightseeing, Sasuke didn't suppress the urge to roll his eyes at the quick response from the emperor. How goes the rebirth of the Uchiha clan? The man was still looking outside through the window. It gave Sasuke the thought that perhaps he was actually being serious about sightseeing. Since he didn't travel outside the capital, he would have missed what it was like to be outside. Slow, no thanks to you, Sasuke responded quietly. Naruto gave no help in restoring the clan, despite being in a position to do so. He was the emperor, he could marry as many women as he wanted, and give them Uchiha children. Combined with what he would make, the Uchiha would be back in a few generations. I have no desire to bring a child to a world like this, the clouds have already gathered, it is only a matter of time before it starts raining. I will allow the rain to run its course before moving into my journey. Sasuke knew that Naruto was aware that a war was coming soon, still he didn't think that the man would have a heart to think of something like that. When the war arrives, parents will be saying goodbye to their children, and children will be holding out the hopes in their hands, while waiting for their parents to return. Naturally, not every parent will return from a war, and not every child will return to the parent. This leaves nothing but pain and hatred to he that caused the pain. I don't plan on dying during the war, but I will however, live past it and take the Uchiha to greatness. The foundation has already been put. I must thank you for that. Thank me. Finally, Naruto turned his head to face the other Uchiha. What have I done to be thanked? You destroyed Konoha. If you hadn't done that, I would have probably left the village to join you. Since the new village was built by the hands of an Uchiha, and only the hands of an Uchiha, I can't leave it alone, Sasuke responded, looking straight at the left eye of Naruto. How Uchiha-like of you, Naruto said, with a small smile. Winners are the ones that write history, that is what Madara used to say. But you don't believe that, do you Sasuke? You're a survivor, and you will write your own history, whether you lose or not. Sasuke didn't comment on what Naruto had said. I'm surprised that you have the heart to think of the health of your children, if you make them to reconsider bringing them into this world. He looked at the emperor carefully, before adding. But even if you do make them, you can keep them sheltered from the water, and you can ensure that nothing happens to them. Your point. By now, Naruto had already turned back to the outside view rather than Sasuke. It is no longer a case of whether you bringing children to this world. I imagine that if someone like you brought a child to this world, there would surely be chaos as shinobi would be after its head to get to you. Sasuke smirked, even though Naruto wasn't looking at him, he knew he would feel the smirk. Why was Samui exiled from Kumogakure? Surely, you could have kept all your workings with her a secret. It's the same with Yugito, nobody knows she works with you. I dug much into finding out the reason and I realized that you had things play the way they did because you wanted her out of Kumo, out of the eyes of people because you had something to hide. I must give you a hand for the way you hid it, though. If it wasn't for my eternal Mangekyo, I wouldn't have seen through it, Sasuke stated. Naruto turned to face Sasuke with a blank look, he only stared at the Uchiha for a few seconds before looking back through the window. Interesting. Not the least concerned, Sasuke thought mildly. Well, it should be expected as he knows I won't tell anyone. Sighing, Sasuke opened his mouth to speak. What do you want me to do? There is a mercenary group in the demon country that is giving Priestess Xian's men troubles, they are attempting to kidnap her for her powers. It is something about selling her valuable eyes in the black market, and then giving the undefiled princess's body to slavery. Deal with the mercenaries, and take the princess to my palace, Naruto stated. Why do I have to deal with mercenaries? Surely anyone can deal with it, and if you actually bothered to deal with the problems, you would earn more favor from your allies. He didn't care much about that, but he didn't want to deal with every little thing that Naruto needed solved. He already knew that the Rice Empire was allied with some nations that were outside the elemental nations. There were a few of them who required protection and some services from the emperor, and a few of those nations have actually met this man in person. It was always that woman who took charge of negotiating things with other nations. While he didn't sit in any negotiations, he knew a few things that went around. The mercenaries are shinobi, some of them are mostly B rank. I'm also curious to know if they were hired by someone to do it or if it is just their will. Naruto paused for a few seconds. Besides, this is a good opportunity for you to flap your wings. Just make sure no one clips them. Sasuke was thoughtful for a few moments before asking, is there anything else? Naruto remained quiet to say no. Sasuke's Sharingan looked around the compartment for a few seconds before he faced the door to leave. These things aren't normal, you do know that, right? Am I stupid? Sasuke shook his head before disappearing from the train. It wasn't too long before an uninvited guest arrived within the second entrance, which was behind Naruto. The man was of a muscular build, he was bald, small black eyes, he was wearing a black vest that clearly showed his masculine upper body, and also wore black shinobi boots, completed with black leather boots. Hello, Your Majesty, there was certainly some mock feeling in the tone of the voice. What are the terms? Ho. The man sounded amused. You certainly don't waste time, do you? But it is no matter, and there are no terms, you just have to sit there and we will do what we must. Though, I must say, we weren't expecting to be taking out His Majesty. Our target was either the Kazekage or the Mizukage, but this is even better. Take out the leaders, huh? The Emperor said, still looking outside the train. Naruto got no response in words, their only response he got was when the entire compartment lit up with explosive tags. They were even on the seat Naruto was sitting on. After a few moments, the man finally spoke. It took us 2 months to prepare the tags, and as you can see, they are no less than 1,000 tags and they are very special. I'm sure even His Majesty can't survive. You sound certain. Yes, the man held a single hand seal before everything went down in a loud boom. The train blew up in a mixture of flames and electricity. The explosion was so big, it took out the whole train and brought up a large mushroom of debris filled with lightning and red flames. The earth might have even shaken under the explosion. It felt as though a tailed beast bomb had been set off. It took a few minutes for the flames to die down, but the train was nowhere to be seen, having burned down under the fire, and a large crater was visible from where debris had picked up. Once everything settled down, Naruto landed in the center of the crater, completely unharmed, his Sharingan staring at the heavens. I really dislike dealing with foolish children, he mumbled. He could sense 3 chakra signatures moving towards him. The one who ignited the fireworks was the suicide bomber while the others stayed behind to clear from the explosion. There was no one strong enough to make him feel like raising his hands to snap a neck or break a bone or two, there were only mere children who needed to be slapped for misbehaving. The 3 rogue shinobi finally reached the edge of the crater, and stood with clear disbelief at what they saw. They'd run through sequences of the explosion, until they could get the right amount of fire power to cause lethal damage to anyone. While this was never intended for the Emperor, it should have damaged him, at least. But there was not even a scratch on him, not even winded from shielding himself from the flames that were tested to be able to penetrate through any defense. What made them powerful was the lightning that was fused within them. How are you unhurt? Simulations showed that no one, not even a Biju, could escape from that explosion without suffering from injury, one in the middle said. Didn't you even bother to ask yourselves why I chose to use this train just after everything was set? Do you think I don't know what happens to my property while it is outside the country? He knew that his train was being tempered with whenever it left the capital for its rounds. It wasn't a public transport, but it moved out a bit. If things had been slow for these people, they would have let the train explode within the capital, and that was something he didn't want, and would personally hunt down anyone who could have set the explosion. The only one who was allowed to start fireworks within the capital was him. Since I'm still alive, why don't you run away now? I won't chase after you. They obviously weren't planning to fight him, and besides, he had no desire to beat up children. Are you mocking us? They didn't move an inch. We came here to do a mission, and we won't run away, not after everything we did. What a pity, Naruto said, taking several steps towards the 3 shinobi. If you'd run away, you would have been heroes who managed to destroy the Emperor's train while he was on board, and managed to escape before he could do anything. Seeing that Naruto was coming towards them in all his menacing glory, the 3 hesitated a bit before hitting the road. They disappeared in a blur, running away from the Emperor. Oh. Now they escape. He stopped walking once he made it out of the crater. I wonder how far we'll run before death finds them. He bended down a bit and placed his right palm down on the ground. Earth chunks began to fill up the crater, until it was fully filled. A few minutes later, a railway began to form, as the sound of a rushing train started to reach Naruto's ears. A replica of the train that was blown up stopped just away from Naruto, and Samui opened the door, inviting Naruto to get in. Is it over already? Kind of, Naruto said, entering the train. Once he was settled down, Samui spoke again. Kind of. It wasn't the definitive answer she was looking. But knowing him, something must have happened for him to give her an answer like that, and that made her curious. They ran away. And you let them? Samui didn't wait for a response before asking another question. So, they are going to live after attempting to kill you, and would have hurt either Gaara or Mei. It is only fortunate that Gurren no longer uses it, otherwise, she would have been caught on the incident. I'm not that merciful. It was a simple response from Naruto that had Samui take her own seat as the train made its way towards the Wind Country. Who was behind the attack then? He hadn't told her anything, but she knew that someone had paid those fools for the work they did. They were probably running back to whoever hired them. Probably someone who wants me dead. That was obviously the case. How long before we reach Sunagakur? Before dawn, Samui said. Before asking her own question. Are we no longer going to pass by the demon country, before heading to the hot springs? He'd just offloaded his task to Sasuke, so he would no longer have any reason to go there. We'll still go there, Naruto said. Although I told Sasuke to take Princess Shion back to the capital, that woman won't leave her place until I get there. A few months ago, she predicted I would go to her, but I didn't actually believe it. Because of the troubles she's facing in her country, my presence is a necessity for things to calm down. How unlike you, Samui said. You're going to prove her right. Why not? She has proved that her powers are no illusions. I should honor that by making an appearance. The little smile on his face made it obvious to Samui that he found this to be amusing. He really has a screwed up sense of humor. Sunagakur, get a personal life, his sister always says, given his obsession with getting his work done. There was nothing he did other than work and work, all day long. He didn't have time for a personal life or to do anything for himself. He was always thinking about the future of Sunagakur, and the shinobi world. Being Kazekage didn't help matters as it gave him much more responsibilities to work on, and he wasn't the type to offload his work to someone else when he could do it himself. It wasn't to say that he didn't get any chance to experience any type of human feelings. He was human, and naturally, different feelings did arise within his heart. Subaku no Gaara was just better in controlling them. He didn't allow emotions to get the best of him or even dictate his choices. Still, there were those vulnerable moments where you just wanted someone to be close to you. He liked having those moments while alone in his room, because then, he could just sleep it off. Gaara wasn't that big on relationships. In fact, he never quite actually gave the idea much deliberation. Still, his sister shouldn't be the one to tell him to get involved, given that she hardly had any contact with any man. Things would have worked well with Shikamaru, but their jobs, and not so smooth relationship with Konoha brought the chirping birds to a halt before they could even land on the ground. Since then, there didn't seem to be anyone who could fit Tamari's personality. It was all another matter for his brother. If he and Tamari really wanted a relationship, they could really get into one. While not everyone appreciated him, he had his own fair number of admirers, and he could make things work. Tamari was a beautiful woman. The only problem was a big personality which almost made her unapproachable. But she has toned things down a bit. For his brother, Kankuro, it was another matter altogether. Kankuro wasn't in a relationship because he didn't want to, or for the lack of trying, he was just failing. Perhaps it was because he aimed too high. At least he didn't have to worry about things too much because he was still young. There were still many years ahead of him, and he would be able to live his life after things have settled down around other nations. It wasn't like the hostility from some nations was going to last forever. A knock on the door brought the Kazekage out of his thoughts. Come in, he said, allowing entrance to the person outside the office. He even raised a curious brow when it was his sister. She never really knocked before walking into his office. There were those days that she did so, but today wasn't that day. Tamari. The blonde didn't respond until she settled down on one of the chairs in front of the Kazekage's desk. The royal train was spotted coming towards the village. It should be reaching us within a few minutes. I wasn't expecting Gurren to be coming here, and it wasn't scheduled to arrive here in this week. Is there something I don't know? Normally, when the royal train came to the village, there was always a notification that went ahead of it. But this time, there was nothing that came, not a damn thing, which was a surprise given how they usually followed the correct protocol. No, Tamari said, shaking her head. This is an unannounced visit by someone from the royal house. I do wonder who it is though. Gurren wouldn't come here without saying something, and as far as things stand, she is supposed to be in Uzu by now. She's still in the Crystal Palace and Conan has yet to arrive in the capital. I imagine that she can't leave the country without the presence of Conan. Gaara said. Perhaps it is the Emperor. That did nothing but make Tamari frown. I wouldn't be surprised with all the storms in the Demon Desert. Gaara found some amusement in the statement, clearly sarcastic. He knew firsthand the Naruto wasn't the most favorite person in Temari's world. It wasn't because the Emperor had actually done something to her. His sister just found all reasons to disagree with his methods and way of doing things. Not that the man did much anyway. His sister was a strong-willed person, who had strong opinions, and she didn't easily accept someone like Naruto who expected his words to be listened to without caring much about what others were saying. She had her own opinions and liked for them to be heard. Still, if was the Emperor coming to him, then it would be a welcome surprise. There were 2 full years between the time that man last came into this village and now. If that man had chosen to finally leave his palace so that he could see what was happening around the nations, to be more precise, his allies, then this was a welcome change that would certainly be a message to other nations. You don't have to be like that, Tamari, Gaara said. She really could act like that in front of the Emperor. The only good thing about it was that Naruto wouldn't be insulted, feel disrespected by it, he would just be amused. Gaara had seen it many times, even when Gurren stepped out of the line. But there were those times when he was smiling. Those were the kinds of moments even Gaara didn't want to be near the Emperor. He was quite scary when he was being almighty serious. He isn't as bad as you think, the Kazekage added. He is actually a nice person, when he wanted to be anyway. Between them, there's never been any conflicts. Gaara always measured things and calculated things well and never forgot to read between the lines. This made it easy for him to deal the Emperor. Yay, right, Tamari snorted. Still, even though she wouldn't admit to anyone, she didn't actually think the Emperor was a bad person, she just disagreed with some of his methods and didn't particularly like that superiority complex of his. Should we go see it is? Let us wait a bit, Gaara said. If it is him, I wish to see what he will do after landing. With Naruto, return to the capital with the train, Naruto said to Samui. The train had already reached its station within Sunagakure, and was ready to depart again. In his next journey, she wasn't needed. Besides, someone had to be watching the royal palace. You want me to go through the desert at this time? Teleport if you don't want to, Naruto responded calmly. You have things to do at the palace, and I require time alone, the Emperor said before standing up, to leave the train. I won't be at the hot springs until tomorrow afternoon. Join me then if you wish. Samui sighed, and here she thought she would finally be able to get some time to spend with him away from the rice for this once, but it appears that he had no such plans. She couldn't force him to do so, as he obviously had other plans in mind, not that he didn't always have a plan. It is rather a surprise that you'd be willing to spend the night outside your palace. When was the last time you did that? You must be willing to step out of your comfort zone every now and then. Was there anything you wanted from me? The former Kumo shinobi shook her head. Have a safe trip, the Emperor said before walking out of the compartment, and landed down on the ground. A second later, the train started moving again. Naruto looked at the direction of the Kazekage Tower, and started walking towards it. The appearance of Sunagakure's greatest ally was nothing short of a miracle, this by the fact that for the past years the Emperor was never seen setting his foot on any land other than in the capital of his empire. Naturally, when the people started seeing the man rumored to be the strongest shinobi in the elemental nations, many activities stopped as the people chose to look at the Emperor. The news ran fast, but no Anbu or any ranked shinobi came into the view of the Emperor to escort him towards his destination, not that Naruto minded anyway. This is actually my first time seeing him, One of the market owners whispered to another as the emperor was walking through the streets, with his lone blood-red eye partially opened, hands folded across his chest. So am I, the person being talked to responded in a shushed tone. That wasn't anything surprising since the emperor was not a man who made public appearances all over the nations. Gaara may regularly visit the rice country, but this man didn't make any efforts to see anyone. This is a good day, and Anbu said standing in one of the tall buildings, with his squad mates behind him. The emperor finally descends down to earth. I wonder what he wants from the cage. Is it time for war already? Not likely, another said shaking his head. I can understand why other nations fear that man. He was a sensory type, and what he was sensing was what made him nod in agreement with assessments made by other shinobi. Not only was he powerful, but it looked as though his field of vision was the entire village because he knew the man had already sensed all Anbu watching his movements. He doesn't look all that threatening to the natural eye, another spoke his mind. The air around him wasn't tense as you'd expect from ridiculously powerful people, it was rather calm, and relaxed just as his body language. You wouldn't think he is actually the man who destroyed Konoha in a few minutes, single-handedly. Certainly, the first Anbu to speak said with a nod. Lord Kage has made his appearance as well, he added, looking at the blank-faced Kage, who was walking towards the emperor, with a stone-faced Tamari on his right. If you weren't told by anyone, you wouldn't know if the man was really the emperor or not. He certainly didn't look like a king. He wore no crown, no gold on his attire, nothing fancy on him was visible. He was wearing a white kimono, with wide high collars. The kimono had a red line in the edges of the collars, there 6 red magatama around the collar. The kimono was partly opened just above his chest to expose the red magatama necklace, its sleeves were short, and had a red lining at the end. At least he didn't care about gold nor making himself rich like other kings in faraway nations. The man wasn't at all interested in being the richest man in the shinobi world. Yes, his empire had tons of money because of the business it makes and fair taxes charged in transactions of sales. The royal house had lots of money and could buy anything they wanted. That is not to say they were the richest. Still, Naruto never flaunted his wealth to anyone, nor would you hear him saying anything about it. I wasn't expecting your presence, Emperor, Gaara said, extending his hand towards the Emperor, who shook it slightly. He proceeded to turn with the man as they went towards his house rather than the cage tower. Naruto didn't ask anything despite seeing the change of directions. I thought it best to get the air of other nations, and which is best than the air of the desert, definitely not mocking or being sarcastic. Tamari, Naruto greeted the blonde sister to the cage, in a slightly warm tone. Your Majesty. How stiff, Naruto commented on Temari's response. And I came all the way from the rice just to see you, he added. Yay right, Tamari said sarcastically. Not even the stupidest person would believe something like that, not even a fangirl. It was Uchiha Naruto in question after all. The man was many things, but that was something he wasn't. She would even be freaked out for real, and probably require medical help from Tsunade if that happened to be the truth. Why did you wish to see me? She chose to indulge him, just to see how he would respond. The royal family is rather small, and my court is empty. I wish to take you up and put you into the capital, where you will be my second wife. I also get a bit lonely since May just visits. It will be good to have a strong woman such as yourself near me, the emperor stated calmly. Temari's neck nearly snapped when she twisted to face the man who didn't stand to look at her reaction. Could it be? It was unusual for Gaara to take guests straight to their house, no matter who they were, and there had to be a good reason for this man to suddenly appear in the village. What? He's just messing with you, Gaara said to his sister. You're right. Just to be sure, he had to ask. Naruto merely gave Gaara a smile. I should build you a good place filled with greens, for amusement, and leisure, he said in thought. Sunagakure certainly lacked greens because of the environment that surrounded it. Most plants wouldn't survive the heat that breathes down the atmosphere each day, non-stop. Like those in the capital. Gaara asked with a furrowed brow. Will it be possible in this kind of place? It wasn't like they hadn't tried nurturing some greens, all attempts have just failed. It is quite possible. There are plants that can survive this kind of environment, and as long as there is a sustainable source of water, my jutsu will not be for waste. Tamari had to remind herself that the man could use Mokuton at a rather higher level. The element seemed to be the only which he uses regularly since his ascendance to the throne. Well, Mokudan was something of a miracle as it actually gave life forms. We can discuss that later, Gaara said. Let us reach my house first. You must have had an uneventful journey towards here. It was indeed uneventful, but the sight wasn't at all bad, Naruto responded. He couldn't say an attempt on his life was an event, since he knew it was going to happen and had predicted it. It became an event when he predicted. When it finally happened, it was nothing more than an annoyance. Later that day, the dinner table, every time one of them was within the village, the Sand siblings always ensured that they gathered around the table for the dinner. Even when Gaara was busy with important things, he always made time for their dinner. This was their family moment, and one they all respected. They may spend most of their time together during day, but it was always about work. Although she treated Gaara like her brother during work, he was the Kazekage and she was his advisor, so was Kankuro. This was the only time they acted like a real family, a family that was in charge of Sunagaku. They don't normally have many visitors during this time as not many dared to come to the house of Subaku no Gaara at this time of the night. Today was one of those days. No, it was more like a rare day. Naruto was having dinner with them. Temari had never thought she would see such a thing happening in all her life. She envisioned the emperor in many bloodied situations, and some good, but she never thought of seeing him beside a dinner table, looking relaxed. While he was not overly smiling, he was still with them. By now he'd removed the kimono he'd been wearing, and as she suspected, it was of fine material and rather heavy for a mere kimono. He was now wearing a simple long-sleeve red shirt, which had an Uzumaki swirl, in black, around the chest. He also wore blue shinobi pants, completed with blue shinobi sandals, which were bought for him in the village as he wasn't wearing any. His feet had been just bandaged. In response, he said, I spend so much time indoors that I forgot that I needed them when going outside. Temari had snorted at the response. Do you find it that hard to grasp that I am having dinner, more especially with you? Naruto asked Temari, while not particularly looking at her. He had noticed her stare, and assumed she had questions. Normally, he wouldn't have bothered to ask, but her responses were interesting to say the least. Yes, Temari said, sparring no punches. You act indifferent even in meetings regarding the future of the shinobi world, so it is only natural for me to assume you'd be even indifferent in something like this. She had often attended one of those council meetings, or just meetings between allies. Naturally, all meetings were held in the presence of the emperor, but he was hardly a factor as he said nothing unless asked. More often than not, his response was, so as you like. Would you actually believe it if I told you that I do actually have moments like these during some nights in the royal palace? Naruto said, but didn't wait for Temari to respond. You just don't like me that much, do you? Gaara wanted to tell Temari to keep her thoughts to herself but stopped when he figured that Naruto wouldn't be insulted since he never kept some thoughts about some other people to himself. The emperor always spoke his mind, and surely, he wouldn't have a problem with others being the same way. He would be a hypocrite if he didn't allow it. Still, Gaara knew Naruto wouldn't be like that. Above all things, he did like people who could stand up to him, people who couldn't just cower because he stared at them. I don't dislike you, but I neither like you, Temari said firmly. Her brows furrowed when Naruto seemed amused by her response. Does that amuse you? Chunin exams in Konoha, didn't you beg for me to spare Gaara's life when I wanted to kill him? Naruto asked. The memory was quite fresh inside his head. Not that he often loses his memories anyways. Now you talk to me in that way. Shouldn't you be at least nice to me because I didn't cease your existence during that time? It wouldn't have been out of nothing even if he had. Konoha and Sunagaku were fighting, and he was a Konoha shinobi at that time. Naturally, since they were enemies, he wouldn't have been blamed if he'd killed them. During those days, he actually killed mercilessly. But of course, their deaths would have left Sunagaku broken since they were the children of the Kazekage, who was killed by Orochimaru. Temari snorted, considering what you've done for Jinchurikis and to Konoha, I doubt you would have done so. If you had, you wouldn't be allied with us, now would you? Your hand at politics is pathetic, and I thought you'd be a little better since you're practically Gaara's shadow. Now Temari was insulted by those words, but she bit her tongue. I gain nothing from the alliance with Sunagaku, On its own, the rice can manage and I can protect it from enemies. It is Sunagakure which benefits from the alliance. Well, what do you say? I spared your life, and offered you a beneficial relationship, expecting nothing in return. Kankuro chose to stand up at that moment before Tamari could muster a comeback. I'm going to eat in my room, he said, but he was stopped by Gaara's hardened tone. Sit down, Kankuro. Gaara turned to Naruto, so you're saying you're a good person. While Naruto wasn't an overly joyous person, he wasn't an overly corrupted person. If you ask anyone who actually knows him in person, they will all say that he isn't a bad person. Mei was the first person to boldly say so, and Gurren followed. Kakashi spoke something about those lines, so did Sasuke. Actually, the Uchiha seems to praise Naruto more than he should. Naruto watched lightly as Kankuro sat down before responding, Uchiha Naruto a good person. I don't certainly try painting myself as such, and saying that I am good is meaningless, just as it is meaningless to say, I love you, without actions to back it up. Shinobi say a lot of meaningless things, simply because they can. People have different perceptions of things around them. My people see me as a good emperor, for I do nothing that might be considered wrong to them. I have only built a home for them, and made it the safest place they can be. To some people, I'm a merciless tyrant, demon incarnate, a bastard selfish and arrogant Uchiha. If your words can change something, if you have the power to change things, you will not be liked or admired by anyone. Hashirama was well liked by everyone, even outside his village. People just tended to take advantage of his kindness. Despite that he was practically worshipped as a saint despite his godly power, what is it that he accomplished in his life that managed to change the direction of the shinobi world? What I am trying to say is that whether you like, hate, or loathe my existence, it changes nothing, it matters not. Uchiha Naruto's word is law, and my influence has turned the shinobi world to what it is today, and it will soon change drastically, because of me. So between Uchiha Naruto and Senju Hashirama, who was seen as a saint, who can brag the most in the afterlife? Mind you, Hashirama died without even realizing his greatest desire, peace. Hashirama may not have accomplished as much as you, but between the two of you, he was the happiest. I think your happiness is better than what you achieve in your life. You have everything you can want, but one might say you're miserable. Tamari paused for a few moments before asking. So tell me, Uchiha Naruto, between you and Hashirama, who's laughing now? Ho. Your hand is not pathetic as I'd first said, Naruto seemingly bemused despite the punch line from Tamari. But, what I am is by choice. I have no regrets in me, there is nothing in me that makes me loathe my existence. In fact, I'm quite content with my life, I only need to clean a few things. Everything is by choice, just as your lifestyle is a choice. Perhaps, but, there is nothing more to add, Tamari, Naruto said, cutting off the blonde Jonin in a light tone. Have you turned into an all-round shinobi? The emperor asked, looking straight at the cage. The subject was changed just like that, and Tamari didn't have anything to add. Obviously, Naruto had lost interest in their conversation. Gaara nodded. Often, he had been told by many close to him to learn other ways to fight so that he can defend himself when he is caught up in a situation where he can't use his sand. His fighting prowess was dependent on his sand, and without it, he couldn't do much, he was vulnerable. His taijutsu sucked, he knew no kenjutsu, and genjutsu. But now he had improved in all that. He didn't just depend on his sand, he had other ways to fight. He'd also managed to gain more control over sand in such a way that he could almost do anything with it. Good progress, Naruto said with a nod. I assume it would be suicide for any army to match to this village in the thought of an invasion. Given your control over the sand, you can protect Sunagakure from any threat. Kankuro sighed in relief since the conversation had taken a new direction. It would have continued to be uncomfortable for him if they'd continued with that topic. He cleared his throat and asked something bothering him. So, what brought the emperor here? He hadn't been around during day to actually know why the man had come here, hence the question. The emperor came here to see the village while passing by to the land of springs, Naruto said, referring himself in third person as Kankuro had done so. As soon as he said those words, there was a flash of black on his right side. Naturally, that put the other occupants in the room on guard. But Gaara was the first to relax when he realized who the person was. Your Majesty, Naruto's messenger started in a whisper, only to the ears of the Emperor, there is a change in the situation regarding the priestess Shion. What? Sasuke handled the situation presented to him efficiently, but we had underestimated the operations of the enemy. The purpose of trying to abduct her isn't to sell her, but for survival. When you have someone who can predict the future, you can work on the present to attempt changing that future. Those vermin require her power to their aid, their quest. 3 hours after Sasuke left, another wave reached the country, and they managed to surround her compound. I was able to track the leader down. Sasuke should be heading to his location anytime soon. But that won't change the situation in the demon country. So far, she hasn't been touched, but I know it is only a matter of time. He had planned on going, but not to save that woman's life. Well, he didn't have a choice now. Still, he wasn't going to dirty his hands with mere children. I'll see you at the main entrance of this village in a few minutes, he said to his messenger, who nodded and disappeared in a flash. Cage, will you take a walk with me? Gaara nodded, and stood up. He was done with his dinner anyway, and besides, something seemed to have come up for the man to be leaving after he'd hinted on staying here for the night. A few minutes, watching her brother return, Temari was the first to ask. What did he want? Gaara waited until he sat down before he responded. Nothing, he answered. The emperor didn't request anything from him to say that he wanted something. They just talked for a few minutes about this and that. Uzushigakure Karen glared at the paperwork in front of her. When she moved into the island, she was first and foremost excited about the freedom she would gain by being here, in her own land, her own playground. When she was still working for the snake, Orochimaru, she wasn't actually free because she never got to do anything she liked and that man was always watching her every move like a hawk. There wasn't anything that she would do that he wouldn't know, and he punished anyone who didn't do things he'd ordered for them to be done. To Orochimaru, everyone was disposable, her included. The rice country was a little different because Naruto never actually bossed her around. While she got busy with building the empire with Gurren, she was at least free. Because there was no chain binding her into one place. Gurren was a little annoying and frustrating since she always reminded her that Naruto had put her in charge of all the operations. She was actually happy in that place, despite a few cat fights with that woman. When she finally got this place, she was happy, filled with excitement, and the first few months this place felt like home, her home, and she cherished the feeling. Getting a few people to work in different departments had all but ensured that she didn't miss any human contact, and the few brats from the capital who lived here while being trained by her and her assistants alleviated some of her boredom and ensured that she did something good for the future leaders of this island. She wasn't going to rule over the research facility for all eternity. She knew that and would do anything to ensure that its future was kept intact. Instead of spending much of her time enjoying herself, Karen was forced to take in more work than she expected. Some nights she didn't even get a good night's sleep because unfinished business would keep nagging her until she finished it. It was good that she got helpers and assistants, otherwise, she would have certainly dropped dead by work overload. Still, she had no regrets, she was quite pleased with herself and her life in general. Something wrong, Karen? Shizune asked. Walking into the Uzumaki's office, the office didn't have a lot of things. The only noticeable things were the shelves in both sides of the office, a couch on the left side, with a small table just beside it, and a refrigerator at the corner on her right side. There was a large window behind Karen's desk, which made up the fourth wall of the office. The scene behind the window was that of a greenly forest. There will be a temporary change in leadership at home, she said. The rice was like the motherland to most of them. While this may be her home now, the capital was still her home. She'd helped build the place after all. That was news to Shizune. She didn't think that something of that nature would happen. Judging by the look on Karen's face, it seemed like she wasn't happy with the change. But surely, Naruto wouldn't be moved in his position as emperor. That led her to conclude that the change was on the prime minister, or Konan, who was, in a way, in the same league as Gurren. Konan chaired the Empire's council, and supervised all outside relations that had to do with the Empire. If there was anyone who knew things in the capital more than Gurren, it had to be her. Don't you like her? Shizune asked carefully. She didn't understand why Karen would look displeased by the change if she liked the blue-haired woman. From what she knew, Konan wasn't that much of a bad person, she just didn't talk much, but she was smart. Karen once admitted Gurren was nothing compared to that woman, and while she was better with scientific principles, Conan beat her in other areas. That's not the case, Karen said. I have no problems with Conan, but a change in leadership means that there will be a change in our monthly budget. Oh, now she understood it quite well. For anyone doing research, technological experiments, and medical experiments, the budget to carry out all activities was necessary. Without a sufficient budget, there was no way to carry out some experiments. For someone like Karen, that would be like hell itself. I was able to negotiate a good budget with Gurren because Yukimaru is living under my care. In ma simple ways, she used the fact that Gurren was very sensitive to anything that concerned Yukimaru to her advantage. But with Conan taking charge, she will require that I explain everything, necessity of all the funds I require. If she finds other things to be unnecessary, she will cut off the funding. Settling down, Shizune tried comforting the woman. Well, you can always go back to the emperor to ask from him. You're legally his brother, and that makes you royalty. Shouldn't royalty hold more power than anyone else? Karen frowned. In other kingdoms it is like that. But birth and family relations don't mean anything in terms of power when it comes to the way things are handled in that place. Royalty only means you're related to the king, and that's it. Unless you hold any position, you're just the child, sister of the emperor, she explained lightly. That is a good thing, wouldn't you say? Karen didn't deny it. I have gone to him in a situation like this, and you know what he did. It was rhetorical, so Shizune didn't respond. He did his favorite, emperor pose, and told me to use the money I'd inherited when I became his sister. I assume there was a problem there. Shizune said in thought. Yes, Karen said with a nod. I'd used up all the funds, but hadn't told him. However, he knew about it, and knew that I knew he knew. I'd used the funds for things that I'd kept secret from everyone, but hadn't thought he would know about it so soon. Naturally, he didn't admit knowing anything, and I didn't admit to have used up all money. So, he knew everything but didn't admit it because it was all just amusing for him to watch you struggle with how to tell him, or deliberating whether to tell him or not, Shizune added. He doesn't know everything. This time, Karen managed to smile. He knows I used the money to build some facilities for my other activities. But he doesn't know where I stationed my facilities. He may have a guess on what I may be doing, but he doesn't know everything. I use technology and my powers quite well to hide things. As expected, she basically told her nothing. It was more like there is a rumor about this and that. Well, it should be expected if she was even keeping it from the emperor. But the fact that he doesn't seem to be worried about it makes her think that Karen wasn't doing anything like that Orochimaru used to do in his hideouts. Well, it was a good thing because she didn't have to be worried about anything. Technology was one aspect that Karen did well. The woman was responsible for making the Rice Emperor's trains faster than shinobi. The woman also created a weapon that was dangerous enough for the emperor to destroy it. It wasn't that the emperor feared the weapon. He told Karen that she was not to use her facilities to create weapons. When will this change occur? Shizune asked, returning to the matter at hand. Soon, Karen said. What can I help you with, anyway? I'll be gone for the next 4 days. I've already cleared everything, Shizune said. She worked 4 days in the island and rested for the next 4 days. It wasn't exactly time off, she still did some work at Konoha. Oh, I'd forgotten that you leave for the weekend, Karen said. The train will drop you off in the Wave Country. The route from the Wave to the Fire Country has been cut off while the workers complete construction. The train in question was an underground train that travels through the tunnel underwater from the island to the Fire Country. There was a stop in the Wave. From the Fire Country towards Rice, they were busy with construction on another underground route. The train would be mainly used for transportation of materials from the rice towards Uzu, and products from Uzu to the rice. I see you when I return, then, Shizune said, before standing up so she could leave the office. Chapter 44 Complete indifference to everything that was around him, a slightly bored look covering the parts of his face that was visible, that is how Xian could describe what he was seeing of the emperor. Even with countless bodies all around him, blood sputtered around, he looked as though it was nothing. Not even a drop of blood touched him, even when he didn't appear to mind where his feet touched. But she could not deny the power of his, it was almost omnipotent. The rumors were not far-fetched. He had no peers, no friends when it came to power. But then again, things were made a lot easier because he was dealing with weaker shinobi and mercenaries than he usually does. He hadn't even arrived into the country for more than an hour and he'd already eradicated all connections to the mercenary group which was after her person. He destroyed all camps, all nin surrounding her place of residence after her men had been defeated. He defeated everyone without even seeming like he was trying. It looked as though he was being forced to punish misbehaving children. He certainly looked down on her enemies, and didn't even consider them to be worth anything to even bother to attempt striking a conversation with them. He'd simply dealt with them without even a word to them. Xian had always known of his power, and much more about his personality, but she'd never been quite close to him like this before. The so-called self-serving, arrogant and evil emperor was walking towards her, all alone. His white kimono flashing through the dead bodies, without being defiled by anything, something she took curiosity in. With the bodies of background, and her person close by, the emperor spoke, his expression changing as he did. It isn't healthy for the priestess to see such a scene, he said, suddenly in a great blaze of black flames lit up around the ground, burning everything that was bloody. Still, he didn't seem to take interest in it. Even when the flames suddenly disappeared, leaving nothing but an unclothed ground. There isn't much of a choice for me in the matter, really, Xian said calmly. She chose not to comment on what just happened as he didn't seem like he was sparring it much of a thought. But then again, she couldn't even begin to guess what was going on inside his head. There is always a choice, priestess, Naruto stated, finally reaching her. Life is a choice, everything is a choice once you're born into this world. You chose to stand here, nobody dragged you, nobody would have said otherwise if you'd chosen to remain hidden somewhere in a burrow. He walked past her, moving into her compound. Xian followed him behind. What I meant to say was that I was bound by duty, the woman corrected herself. Though I am grateful for the save, I don't think that you came all the way here just to save me. You have people for that, she stated. Must I always be second-guessed in everything I do? The emperor paused for a moment, waiting for something. Sasuke then flashed behind the two. I see you've already cleaned up everything, the Uchiha said walking up to catch the two. He didn't bother sparring the remaining of Xian's forces a look as he went towards the priest and the emperor. They were of no interest, so why bother? Well, I should have expected that, but that still begged the question why he was even here in the first place. He didn't seem like he wanted to come to this place when he told him to help clean up the mess. You were supposed to take her away to the capital, Naruto stated. He had specifically told the Uchiha to take the woman out of her country to take her back to his palace, as he had foreseen matters like this happening. She didn't want to, Sasuke responded with a shrug of his shoulders. Besides, it would have caused an outrage from her people if I had taken her away by force, the Uchiha added calmly. He wasn't at least concerned about the disregard of Naruto's orders as it wasn't the first time things didn't go as planned, but he always got the job done. I guess, but they could have been made to understand things perfectly. Their priestess was under our protection and if we offering protection decide to take her away to a safe place, they should understand as they are unable to do what is expected of them, Naruto said, not minding the fact that the very men he was speaking of could hear him. Yes, but leaving the place alone without her would have been disastrous as they might have destroyed this place because their target was now gone, Sasuke defended his choice. They were talking like she wasn't hearing them or even present. Xian found it to make her feel otherwise, irate to be precise. How could they discuss her matter like she had no say in anything they were talking about? It was her life and she could decide on her own where she wanted to be for her protection, and she certainly didn't think there was a need for her to be dragged into the rice when she only needed Naruto to remove the thorn in her side. I am still around, you know. Naruto's eyes turned to her for a moment. That wasn't forgotten, but it isn't really polite to speak about such a matter without consulting you first. He may be offering security and protection, but he did have to consult with her on how to handle some matters, especially when talking about removing her from her home. Still, given first choice to act, he would have just removed her without asking. A bit hypocritical after sprouting nonsense about there being a choice in everything. It amused him that he could find faults in his sayings, yet even when he knew he would deny her a choice, it didn't bother him a bit. He preached a gospel he didn't act. Well, he did have a choice in everything, he wasn't just offering other people the same courtesy. Oh well, who cares? I doubt even if I had said I wanted to stay that would have made a difference, Xian responded calmly, leading the two men into her home. There wasn't any doubt that this man did whatever that he pleased and wanted, without regards to what anyone thought. Yet, she still called him for help. Most likely, Sasuke added with a small nod, not a hint of disdain to imply he wouldn't agree with it. If he hadn't found it bothersome to drag the woman to the capital city of the rice country, he would have done so. Before we even get to that, would you have even chosen to stay in this place if a way out was given? Naruto asked a question which Xian didn't respond to. You have grown from being that ungrateful child you used to be, but you're still the same person. Ah, there goes the civil conversation, Sasuke thought midly. Naruto may have changed a little. But he still didn't really check on who he was talking to before opening his mouth. He found no problem in insulting anyone. He guessed it was a good thing that he was never involved in peace talks, he would ruin them beyond repair. But it is to be expected for the man never to change his tone. He does view himself to be superior to anyone. Is it wise to speak to me like that when you've obviously come for something from me? Xian asked, rather nicely. While she found no insult in his words, she would appreciate for him to speak to her in a respectful manner, both of them were leaders after all. What I require from you is your services, but it is nothing that is of a need to say that I would actually beg, or feel the need to, humble, myself before you, Lady Xian. He basically told her he wanted her services but didn't actually need them. But there is such a thing as free will, I wouldn't want to do anything to take that away from you. Everyone loves free will after all. Well, that he was telling the truth, Sasuke thought mildly. Naruto was many things, but he didn't actually force people to do what he wanted or manipulated or blackmail people to get things done in every turn. He did consider the choice first before acting. That isn't to say he wouldn't snap her neck if there was a need to do so, and he would do so without even being remorseful. Sasuke had never seen anyone who could be so indifferent towards death like Naruto. He was sure the man wouldn't even cry if anyone he cares for died. Then again, would he cry? That remained to be seen. You aren't much of a convincer. With the way you speak, I can't be convinced or persuaded to offer my services to you, and it didn't help what people say about him. I see no need to persuade anyone to do anything. Whether you want to do something or not, that is your choice, I don't have to smooth talk things. You like something or you don't. It was easy as that. Why color things when they could be put as they are? Xian shook her head and refused to comment any further. It has been a rather long day for me, so I will just show you where to rest for the night. We will talk tomorrow. She had been working her mind since the day began, she was really tired. She'd actually never worked her mind as much as she did today. Later Sasuke had the time to raise a brow when he found Naruto sitting on the rooftop of Xian's compound, head facing up, and unblinking, as well as unmoving. It almost seemed like he was caught up in a daze. Tonight was one of those nights where it was clear as day with the full moon brightening up the night while its cold breath brought forth a cool breeze. Their only reason the bandits had even stayed up late in their attacks was because of the full moon. It was really rare in this world, for the moon to light up so brightly. Passing sentimental thoughts? Sasuke asked, curiosity dripping through his tone. He was really curious. This was a rare moment for the other Uchiha. A behavior like this could be compared to his liking of the Hokage monument in Konoha. Naruto turned his neck to look at Sasuke. Do I look like a sentimental fool to you? Sasuke merely shrugged in response before settling down. I wonder what Hagoromo and Hamura are thinking up there. They must be having one hell of a discussion to light up the moon like this. Although he wondered who Hamura was, Sasuke didn't ask. And you wish you were right in the middle of it, offering your own thoughts while the sage disagreed with them by giving his own reasons based on his perception of you. Sasuke shook his head, removing the image. Where else are you going to visit before returning to the capital? Naruto had turned away from Sasuke, so he just turned his eyeballs. Do you wish to move behind me, Sasuke? What would Kakashi think if it becomes known that you were acting as my protector? Sasuke shrugged. It isn't like you care, and I don't. So there is no point on fretting over it, he said. So, Nadeshiko, Kiri, and Springs, Naruto said. Though, he may visit Kuritsuchi just to see how things play out. He was a bit surprised that Sasuke would choose to move about with him though. But considering that the Uchiha doesn't care what people think of him, it shouldn't be much of a surprise. Nadeshiko will be tomorrow, then around noon it is Kiri. The day that follows will be Springs, that was a good vacation. The Springs had much things for leisure, and since he'd been working non-stop for as long as his memory can take him, he really needed some rest. Sounds like a plan. I'll send a clone to Konoha, just in case. I never agreed to taking you with me, Naruto said, laying on his back. Sasuke shrugged, standing up. I never asked for your permission, he said. Now, if you will excuse me, I will go to rest. That woman didn't even feed me. What a horrible house guest she is, the raven-head Uchiha mumbled while walking away from Naruto. Following morning breakfast was prepared early as the guests wanted to leave. For this reason, Shion was forced to wake up early and she found it to be frustrating. Shall we get onto it? It was Naruto who took the words out of her mouth. First of all, thank you for everything, both of you. Emperor, Shion started. I will forever be grateful that you saved my life. I will forward the payment I find to be worthy to your kingdom once everything has been settled. Naruto waved the hand in a dismissive manner. I don't require money for you, priestess, he said. There is one way you can pay me though, he didn't say. On another matter, my men will arrive here before noon to clean up everything and upgrade your security. That will be completed for free. Although it sounded good to be true, Sasuke nodded to confirm that the emperor wasn't messing with her. Shion smiled brightly and bowed her head a little. Thank you, your majesty. She returned to look at him before a rewind of his words played in head. Hold on a minute. What do you mean there is one way I can pay you? You don't actually mean that, do you? A rare thing occurred. Both Uchihas looked amused. What do you mean exactly by that? Sasuke gave the woman the look, which made Shion feel like he was undressing her. Oh, you mean that? Yes, he means that. What? Shion raised her voice. There is no way I'm doing that. Sasuke, Naruto called. You shouldn't make fun of her. She is inexperienced, he said. What I want from you is for you to offer a day once every month to the kingdom to work as a priest. There are people in the capital who have been misled to believe that there is a democratic leadership and have requested that a temple be built for them to worship. You're indulging them. Why not? Naruto threw in. The matter is trivial, and it is good to have them under the Ilsuian that they actually have a say in everything and their word means something. After all, the people are free when they believe their king is a people's person. Everyone likes democracy, why not illusion one for them? Unknown location, what is our mission again? A white-masked Anbu asked as he sat down on a tree branch, overlooking the hidden entrance to an underground facility created by Karen. It had taken some time to find this place and its entrance. The only reason they were even able to find out of its existence was because of the comings and goings that occurred on different time periods. Beside him, were 4 other Anbu from Iwagakure. They were commanded by their leader, the Tsuchikage, to come to this place and strip it of its valuables. Karen was rumored to be developing weapons behind the emperor's back, and they knew exactly what it was that the woman was creating in this facility. There were more of them than this one, but this one interested the Tsuchikage the most. Since they weren't expecting too many guards to be in this place, Onoki had only ordered the 5 of them for this mission. Given that they were Anbu, they could complete the mission effectively and efficiently without leaving too much and wasting too much time. Storming into the facility wasn't possible given all the security surrounding the place. They'd studied the surrounding for weeks before setting out. And had managed to get someone in the inside to work with them. You already know the mission parameters, why do you ask again? The leader of the team asked, a bit annoyed at the question since they'd been through this already. I don't think he is capable of completing this mission, another Anbu said. He too didn't feel comfortable with doing the mission, but orders were orders, and they were Anbu, their emotions didn't have to get in the way. Still, even if they were a unit that specialized in S-rank missions, some missions they could pass. Look, we signed up for this when we became Anbu. Now isn't the time to question things, another said. I signed up to completing covert missions that help secure the village and deal with any threats. I signed up to working in the shadows to ensure that Iwagakure was safe from everything, but killing innocents has never been something that I was ever tasked to do and it surely is something that I never thought that I would be forced to do, White said again, a bit strongly. The problem wasn't just the act of killing innocents, it was just the number of innocents they had to kill. He could do with one or two, but when we spoke of hundreds innocent people who knew nothing, done nothing, he drew the line. Onoki had never ordered them to do something like this before, he never crossed the line he was crossing now. Was the emperor that much of a threat that he was willing to do everything that was unacceptable just to win against him? No one could deny the fact that the emperor was indeed powerful, but so far he never threatened Iwagakure or any village for that matter. It was understandable that he would seek to destroy Konoha after what they did to him. But he'd never threatened any village, he minded his business as his empire continued to grow. Why was the Tsuchikage so bent on starting a war with the man? Why couldn't he just leave things as they were? As an Anbu, White had never been disgusted with the job, but this kind of mission they were given disgusted him. Hell, he wouldn't even be surprised if the emperor storms into their village after they complete the mission. He wouldn't fault the man for attacking, but he would still have to fight in order to protect his village. Such a fucked up world they were living in. Orders are orders, man, the leader of the group said. Our insider won't be coming out in 4 hours. Let us first go to complete this mission that you're all making a fuss about. Then we can return here to conclude things. After which, we will return home. The sooner we do this the better. Regardless of how much we dislike this, we're still going to do it. It is our mission and an order from the Tsuchikage. We're not in a position to question orders, but to follow them. Admittedly, even he didn't like the mission, but they had to do it. You all know your targets, and this stage, it shouldn't take time for us to complete the mission. You all got to make sure you hit your target. The Tsuchikage was very clear about this. If you don't complete your mission, don't return. Unless you wanted to be hunted down and disciplined for insubordination, you had to follow through the mission. At the state of mind the Tsuchikage was in, he would probably label anyone who doesn't succeed in the mission a traitor, and once you were called a traitor, it was either death or the cold cells of the Anbu. These were the kind of times one wished the Tsuchikage would just listen to Kuretsuchi when she tried speaking some sense into him. Let us just do this and get over with it. Besides, we only have a short window frame to succeed here or that woman will know, the leader said. Let us rendesis in 2 hours for the next stage of the mission. Hi. Kurigakure, you do this on purpose, don't you? Sasuke asked as he walked through the streets of Kiri with Naruto beside him, heading towards the Mizukage Tower. You just want to create a buzz over your appearance in the village. You did the same in Suna and you're doing it again. I find the attention they offer me appealing. Every now and then, I wish to bask in the praises and looks of adoration they offer to the emperor, Naruto responded quietly. Sasuke rolled his eyes, like you care for something like that, he said. You're not here for them or to see how they react when Sasuke, Naruto said, cutting off the Uchiha. Don't analyze everything I do or say. While it is occasionally fun seeing you try to work out the reasons behind some of my actions, I also find it annoying when you start analyzing everything I do like I do don't pointless things just for the sake of it. Sasuke shook his head before speaking. I'm going to find something to entertain me for the night ahead. That meant he would be seeing the emperor in the morning. You should do something entertaining as well. The Uchiha disappeared after saying those words. Naruto didn't take more than 5 steps before Ao came up to him. The Jonin offered to lead him to the Mizukage's tower. Seeing that he'd spoken too much yesterday and this day with Sasuke, Naruto didn't indulge much in the Jonin's attempt for conversation. He chose to enjoy the view of the village that hails him as a hero more than his own country. These people really did adore him. Well, he did save them during the Civil War. He'd basically ended the war by himself. Perhaps a part of him liked to see them smile and beam in joy when they see their hero walk amongst them. Even though he was now the emperor and reigning supreme over the rice, their behavior towards him hadn't changed. To them, he was still the same boy who saved them a few years ago. I would like it if you tell me prior your visit that you're going to come so that I can prepare things for you, Mei said, sitting behind her desk, as soon as Naruto walked into her office. Why should I do that? What do you need to be prepared for? Are you perhaps seeing someone behind the emperor's back? Naruto asked. He didn't sit down though. He chose to remain standing, just away from Mei's desk as he wasn't here to stay. Who knows? Maybe I am. If the emperor doesn't look after his things, then someone will take them away and make use of them. Mei said in a careless tone, and a shrug. I doubt there is any men who would dare defy the emperor in that manner, lest he wishes for a hurrying death, Naruto said. Leave a clone behind so we can get out of here. Mei folded her hands across her chest. I'm busy. If you didn't know, I am a cage and have certain responsibilities I must honor. She kept her poker face as she spoke. The Emperor commands it. The Mizukage smiled. Well, why didn't you start with that? She said, standing up. The fifth Kage Kiri walked up to Naruto, took his right hand, and rubbed shoulders with him as she leaned closer. So, where are you taking me, husband? She asked, leading him out of the office. Imperial Palace. Karen had never been summoned to the Imperial Palace before. Naruto had never as much as demanded her presence before him. From what she gathered, he had cut short his travels around the elemental nations because something had come up. She didn't know what the problem was, but it sounded really important that the man had decided to summon her into his presence. His messenger had been rather forceful even when he could see that she was busy with her work. Who liked being interrupted while doing groundbreaking research? Do you wish for me to tell the Emperor that you said you were too busy to honor his summons? That man had so smugly questioned. She knew he only said that on purpose because the Emperor wouldn't be pleased if she refused to see him because she was too busy. No one was ever busy for him. When he summoned you, you had to be there. It didn't matter if you were busy on top of a guy riding him tirelessly. When the Emperor called you on a serious note, especially when he sent his messenger, you had to be there. Karen has seen so many of Naruto's faces. While he usually wears the mask of indifference or just complete boredom while sitting on his throne, he had his moments of smiles, amusing remarks, and then there were those moments he reminded you that he was Uchiha Naruto, the emperor of the biggest empire in the elemental nations and the strongest shinobi. As far as she was concerned, she hadn't done anything wrong to that would warrant his call, not yet anyway. Her secret activities couldn't be counted because they were secret. Naruto permitted her to do a lot of things. One would say he spoiled her, especially when she was still living in the rice country, but he had his moments where she could forget that he had become the man she had to call brother and just remember him as the man who killed Orochimaru and had her running scared just by sensing his chakra. When Karen walked into the Imperial Hall, she found his royal subjects, Konan and Sasuke standing just away from the Emperor, who was on his Emperor pose, expression pure blank. This really made her nervous because she didn't know what he may be displeased with, or what may have gone wrong. Had he found out what she did in her secret labs? Nothing in her experiments had gone wrong because she always tested everything to ensure that it was safe to be used before transporting it back to Motherland. I have arrived, Your Majesty. Karen did a quick bow in show of the customary respect. I left all my work as quickly as I was told my presence was needed. She had recited this so many times while preparing to face the man she hadn't seen in a few months. When you didn't know where you stood with him, you had to be on the cautious side of things. Apparently, that was the Emperor's reply. Ah, that said it, she was screwed. Could he have found out about her secret work? She had done everything she could do to hide it, and even though he'd told her not to make weapons, she had continued on to do so because she liked creating them. She wasn't planning on using them, but she just had them created because she had the resources, knowledge and power to do so. She just wanted to create something that she could marvel at. Karen narrowed her eyes at Konan who was standing firmly on her right then Sasuke on her left. Both were wearing unreadable expressions and she couldn't tell anything by their chakra as both were calm. Sasuke, she put on a nervous smile, greeting the raven-haired Uchiha. Konan, she acknowledged the blue-haired's presence before looking back at the Emperor. There was really nothing that Naruto could do that would surprise Sasuke. Really, he expected everything from the Emperor. However, he was a little surprised when the man cut off their travels without so much as an explanation. They'd been forced to return here, and he called upon Konan as soon as he returned. Konan had only arrived into the country recently. Is there anyone we're waiting for? Sasuke asked. No, Naruto said. What is the emergency then? Konan asked. She didn't really need a heavy load of work to do when she just arrived. Considering how big the country was, she would be having much to do, but that needed settling, and she hadn't settled yet. The fact that these two didn't seem to know anything about this meeting didn't make Karen feel any better. She'd asked Gurren before getting here, but the woman didn't know anything either. Even that messenger who brought her here didn't tell her anything. But there was no way he didn't know. Karen braced herself when she looked the Emperor carefully. His chakra was calm, as always, and he seemed to be going through some thoughts. As Hysuke would say, he isn't thinking about anything, but just a mask he likes wearing to give you some hope. It appears that my time in the sidelines is over, Naruto started. That was nothing more than a shotgun bullet that punched through the heavy load she was carrying. 5 of this kingdom's trains were destroyed early this morning. A ship heading towards the water country has gone off radar. It is likely that it was destroyed as well. A section of the Great Imperial Wall was destroyed along the Fang's borders, and this allowed some insects to get into the country. The City of Sound was partly destroyed in the west sections. Fortunately enough, the fools were caught before they could do further damage. Silence settled in as they all bitterly welcomed the news. The trains from the Imperial Kingdom carried at most 100 people, and if 5 were destroyed, they were looking at casualties of about plus or minus 500 people. Sasuke didn't think that anyone would go that far to kill innocents just like that. Naruto kept a close eye on his trains, so it is given that they were destroyed while doing their rounds outside the rice country. The Uchiha assumed that if the same detonations is the one used on Naruto, then there couldn't be any survivors. The Great Imperial Wall was a huge wall created by the Emperor, taking him up to 3 months to build it. The wall surrounded the country, going through along its orders. These walls weren't just normal walls, they were huge, bigger than the ones Konoha used to have before it was destroyed. The walls made it impossible for anyone to pass through any section within the country. This meant that no army would attack them at any side, and since only 6 gates were created along the walls, everyone could be checked while entering or leaving the country. Each gate was heavily guarded and Sasuke didn't think of anything that could be capable of destroying the Great Walls though. Naruto had created impenetrable walls in the old Konoha when he didn't want anyone leaving the village. The only thing that had proved enough damage was a swing from a perfect Susanoo's blade, and if he or Obito didn't do it, then that ruled out Susanoo. So what destroyed the wall? This is troubling. Conan said. Were there any casualties in the City of Sound? The city didn't have more than 2 years in existence. She could remember the day Naruto proposed the idea to build another city to control migration into the capital. The city was created as another place overflowing with life and riches. Another perfect place to live. No, the emperor said. The forces were able to evacuate people into safety before anything could happen. The weapon they were using proved to be too powerful for the imperial forces to act rashly. Karen visibly flinched at that, but Naruto looked at Sasuke. I just wanted you to know what is happening. From now on, your services will no longer be required. Your contract has been terminated. The emperor will handle things. So he was no longer needed, Sasuke thought mildly. Oh well, this gave him a chance to settle things in Konoha and put more focus in ensuring that the village was secure. The only reason these unknown people had been bold enough to attack was because Naruto no longer took any part in battles and rumors start surfacing that perhaps he'd grown weak. If Naruto was going to handle things, then it meant he was going to crush all foolish thoughts of defeating his kingdom. Can you at least tell me who? In due time, that was the only response Sasuke was given before Naruto turned to Karen. The Uchiha knew he was dismissed, and so he left the presence of the emperor. In many ways, that dismal was rather cold, especially given how Sasuke had served the emperor. There wasn't even a thank you, but a termination of contract and these words, "You've served your usefulness, return to Konoha." Things happening now on were no longer the Uchiha's concern. Even so, Sasuke didn't seem disturbed by it. It was as if he had been. Karen, the voice of the emperor cut off the Uzumaki's train of thoughts. When I sternly tell you to stop making weapons, I fully expect you to. But you've disobeyed me. Do you know what your disobedience has cost me? Karen couldn't find the words to respond to the emperor. When Naruto actually used the word obedience, it was something serious. There were many instances that his subjects improvised his orders, and someone like Sasuke sometimes outright ignored them. Naruto never used that word. Perhaps it was because they always brought good results. It wasn't that Naruto only cared for results, he was just in a state of mind where he was willing to permit it. However, he wasn't happy when things turned bad, like now. I assume Iwagakure finally got its hands on that weapon, it would explain how the Great Wall had been breached. The kind of weapon those people were looking for from one of Karen's facilities, specifically the one in Shimogakure, was powerful enough to destroy a village. It only required large amounts of chakra for activation, anything less than cage level couldn't activate it. Indeed they have, Naruto said. However, we've managed to retrieve it. But the damage has already been done. Since they raided the facility, and took her subjects, they can rebuild it again. I can slow them down by blocking purchases of materials needed. In due time, I will however, have to invade Iowa for this action. Conan understood it well that she didn't even have to question. If the weapon was built and taken to any village, it would inevitably mean there would be loss. Naruto's choice of destroying the thing before it leaves Iwagakure ensured that there would be no casualties on his part, but however, sparked war with Iwagakure. They have to be punished for the lives they've already taken, Conan said. However, even though the attack was stopped, this has left a hole in a clear message: the Emperor isn't invincible after all. Yes, Naruto looked at Karen. Go to Iwagakure now, and demand your things. Tell Onoki that I will eventually visit him and lay siege in his village for provoking me. What? Karen couldn't believe it. There is a high chance that they will kill me once I get there, or even take me as hostage while forcing me to build them more weapons. Lower your voice, Karen, Naruto said. This is your mess, and I'm giving you a chance to clean it. I expect you to do as I say. Your weapons were used to kill innocent people, do you not feel the need to take up responsibility? If not, I am willing to allow you to think things clearly in the dungeon. Karen gritted her teeth. At least she knew he wouldn't allow her to be killed, but that didn't mean she wasn't scared. She wasn't looking forward to being sent into the dungeon either. At least send someone with me. You created your weapons alone. You will go alone, Naruto started. Your train will leave in an hour. If you happen to miss it, I will drag you there myself. But that will come at a cost, and I assure you that you don't want to come to that. Do we have an understanding, Karen? Yes, the red-haired Uzumaki said stiffly. Without saying another word, Karen humbly left the presence of the Emperor. Conan wondered what Naruto's purpose was for sending Karen to Iwagakure when he knew the Tsuchikage wouldn't give her the things he stole or even apologize for stealing and the destruction he has caused. The Emperor did just say that he would invade Iowa and destroy a few things. So why even bother sending the woman? Could it be that he just wants to see what Onoki would do, or he just wants Karen to know that she can't get away with doing things like this? The trouble that this will follow will cause things to spiral out of control and likely push the world into war sooner than anticipated, the new Prime Minister of the Imperial Kingdom stated after Karen had left. Yes, and this displeases me, Naruto said. You wouldn't know he was greatly displeased by the look on his face. More fools are going to step into the fray and attack the country at any given time. The trains won't even be safe anymore if things are like this. What are we going to do then? I would suggest adding security forces into the trains. The best case would be hiring the Hyuga to have a single member in each train to search for explosives. She didn't have a problem in using the Hyuga for the safety of the people. It is likely that Konoha won't take part in the upcoming war. It can't afford to fight, not after everything. Though things are a bit difficult between us and then, they are not in a point where we would want to fight them. That seems likely, Naruto agreed. Do what you feel is right as the Prime Minister, and I will make an example of Onoki. This will ward off some lurking insects. However, Konoha won't give you anything. Why? Why wouldn't they if they won't get involved in the war? Konoha as a whole won't get involved, because, as you said, they can't afford to. That doesn't mean they won't send their best. If they don't, they risk being attacked, and neither Kiri nor Suna will aid them. Naruto answered. I've told you not to prepare the forces because this coming war won't be like the previous wars. When I'm your opponent, sending hundreds of shinobi is a waste of human life, as I'm only going to slaughter them. He paused before adding. You do what you must for the safety of the trains. Conan nodded. I will get preparations ready as soon as I settle in. The Emperor stood up from his throne, and walked towards Conan. He motioned for her to follow so he could lead her to the Crystal Palace. So, what have you been up to with Nagato? Naruto asked. Excuse me. Imegakure has grown stronger, and it has become rather peaceful, but Nagato's dream has yet to be fulfilled. He must be growing impatient with me. Conan narrowed her eyes a bit. She didn't like it, but spoke the truth. Yes, he is, but he has been keeping himself busy repelling threats to aim. I see, Naruto said. I wonder what he will do when he is done. What do you think his impatience will lead him to? Obviously he has no faith in me achieving peace, and I don't intend to make things otherwise. I don't know, but he says he will continue as he has been. Naruto merely put on that mask of indifference as they walked through the passages of the large palace. Konan could read Nagato like a book, and she knew exactly what he would do next. Still, the emperor didn't point that out to her. I see. Iwagakure in more recent years, Onoki had never read a report that made him this happy. Yes, he read good reports on the progress of the village as a whole and the military strength he was accumulating. For as long as Naruto rose to fame, Onoki had only dreamt of seeing the kind look the emperor must be having now because of the little action he just took. There was no way the emperor was just going to shrug off this action as nothing and continue his everyday life. This definitely called his attention. The attack was a loud wake-up call. It would have been even more satisfying if he had been able to land a hit on the very den of the lion. Many nations would definitely come to bow in order to join them. Unfortunately, with how far the country was guarded, he was even lucky his men had been able to reach the city of Sound without being surrounded by the imperial army, or the emperor himself. Reaching the capital would require a large army, made of different platoons. He didn't have that now, but he hit the next best thing. The city of Sound, or so the city of Joy. Even though he didn't hit the capital city and his men got captured, the main fact is that he managed to land a hit on the empire. It didn't matter if he hit the leg or hand, what mattered was that he had landed a hit. This was a feat that seemed so out of reach, impossible even, when that man rose to fame. When that man beat them, the cages, Onoki had never been so hopeless. But now he had hope, he could smell victory a mile away. He now knew that it was possible to invade even the rice country. He had shown to the elemental nations that even he could attack the emperor. Yes, Naruto was not so invincible as other people thought he was. Konoha was too much of a chicken to attack him since its defeat in his hands, he couldn't even begin to guess what the Raikage was doing. But that man wasn't spineless and would certainly do what he wants to do. Was it really wise to provoke him like that? Kuretsuchi asked, looking stareyed at her stubborn grandfather. The old man couldn't listen to reason, and this actions was a clear slap on Naruto's cheek and he was going to kindly return it, regardless. She didn't think that the Tsuchikage was powerful to stop an all-out assault from the emperor. Don't question my judgment, Kuretsuchi, Onoki responded sternly. I will do what I think is best for this village that I lead, and it is your duty to respect and support the choices I make as your Tsuchikage. I will no longer tolerate any more of your insubordination. Starting from outright refusing some of the orders he gave, the black-haired didn't seem to listen to anything he said these days, and it really frustrated him because she was his grandchild. He expected her of all people to be in his corner. But she believed that he was leading the village into a dark path and would one day regret the choice he is making. But Onoki wasn't going to regret anything, he was going to die with a smile. If Kuretsuchi had the heart, she would have already plotted to oust him as Tsuchikage. Of course some people would support those kind of thoughts because she knew that not everyone wanted to start a war with someone who didn't appear as though he was going to fight anyone. As testified by these past years, the emperor was minding his own business, and others believed they should mind their business, so did Kuretsuchi. However, Onoki couldn't. I will not support what I do not agree with. Call me what you want, old man, but this is foolishness and you will regret it one day, Kuretsuchi said firmly. Do you think that man will just stand aside and watch your smile like this? Do you think he will sit by and watch you fortify this village? What do you think is stopping him from dropping a meteorite in this village? He could do that, he had that kind of power. Why didn't her grandfather think of it? That man told the old man seriously that unless he was provoked, he wouldn't dare to act or attack this village. And he had made it very clear to her that any harm against his country was unforgivable. Onoki had provoked the man and he would act. Are you doing this so that he can attack? You will have an excuse to start a war with him. Kuretsuchi added a bit angrily. When he does attack, the old man was surely going to act like the emperor was the one who has done wrong when it was him who provoked a lion sleeping peacefully in its den. That is if he does attack, Onoki snorted. If he was going to attack, he would have done it already. Given how quick he is to act, nothing has happened so far. And nothing is going to happen until other nations ally with us after hearing about his success. You amaze me, grandfather, Kuretsuchi started slowly. You know that if other nations join you in your crusade, Naruto will eventually attack, and this will affect even those who joined you. When that does happen, you will have more reasons to coach them to offering their armies so that you can fight the emperor. She wasn't impressed. More like disgusted that he was willing to go that far in his obsession with seeing the downfall of Emperor Naruto. Before Onoki could respond, an Anbu appeared in the office, and whispered to the Tsuchikage, "We have a visitor from the Imperial Kingdom, Tsuchikage-sama." "Who is it?" The Sandame Tsuchikage didn't bother lowering his tone when he responded. Kurotsuchi could hear him for all he cared. Besides, she wouldn't betray him, no matter what. Karen-san, the so-called sister of the emperor, the Anbu said. "Should we escort her here?" Onoki nodded and the Anbu quickly left to carry out his business. Onoki frowned, so the emperor had reacted far quicker than he expected. But Karen's presence was understandable since she was the one he stole from. However, this was also a daring move by the emperor. It was almost like he was daring him to capture Karen. But he wasn't going to fall for the bait, not in a million years. Kurostuchi, the black-haired, stood up without a word, leaving her lips, and walked away from the office. She had other matters to deal with other than hearing whatever it had to be said between the messenger from the Imperial Kingdom and her grandfather. The end result was inevitably going to be the same and she didn't need to predict it or require a prophet to make the prediction. It was clear as day, a play from a book she once read in one of her dreams. Karen was brought into the office of the Tsuchikage with a visible frown on her face. She was by far displeased about what had just occurred. She knew that her presence here really served no purposes. But because she didn't listen, she had to face the music. At least Naruto wasn't going to remove her from Uzu or cut off her budget. "Sit," Onoki instructed in a firm tone. His expression didn't reveal his age, but revealed the face of an experienced sage who has seen many things, perhaps too much. Karen sat down quietly before adopting a blank expression. "You've put me in quite the bind, Tsuchikage-sama," she started monotonously. "You stole my weapons, my people, and used it to harm my people. Considering that the weapons were created by the taxes those people pay, I feel that I am responsible for the harm." So, he dared say something like that. What was going on the frickin' mind of this old bastard? Didn't he understand the seriousness of the situation? Karen considered jumping into her desk and yell, "What is wrong with you?" Or perhaps release a chakra chain and smash the fool around the office to tighten the screws that were definitely loose inside his head. But she calmed herself down. That didn't mean she was going to be civil. Adjusting her glasses, Karen leaned back to her seat and folded her hands across her chest. Now she was comfortable. "I've always heard rumors that you were stubborn. However, I was always told that you were not stupid, Tsuchikage-sama. Now I believe the former, but I'm starting to think that your intelligence may have been exaggerated." Karen had been around Naruto long enough to know how he acted, and this was something he would have probably said to the old coot. It didn't scare her that she had insulted a sage of another village. Since the man wasn't going to apologize and beg for forgiveness, there was no need for her to be civil, and Naruto wasn't going to be civil either. When he does come here, it will be all about business and the destroying part. He won't care for what she said to the Tsuchikage. Since everything has been set, he will be even amused and impressed at her boldness. "Watch what you say to me, brat," Onoki growled. "I will not accept to being disrespected in my own house by a mere child." Ho! Karen arched a curious brow. "What are you going to do about it if I insult you again? Are you going to kill me, hold me hostage? What can you do, Tsuchikage-sama?" A slightly taunting tone was used to further press the Tsuchikage's buttons. "What is stopping me from killing you right now?" He snapped his fingers and an Anbu appeared behind Karen, sword drawn out. "I can have you killed right now and send you back to the rice capital in pieces and simply say that you attempted to kill me." Karen nodded to herself, and remained impassive. "Do you think a reason will be enough to save you from the Emperor's wrath? He does take family rather importantly, and I imagine you also love yours. You have never seen him infuriated, have you? When he destroyed Konoha, he wasn't angry, so what do you think he would do to Iwagakure if you angered him?" Karen paused for a moment, shrugging her shoulders. "If you wish to kill me, go ahead. Naruto will probably revive me. And then turn this village into a large crater. Ah, the joys of being Naruto's sister." The Anbu leaned closer, pressing his blade against Karen's neck, but the red-haired Uzumaki didn't flinch. She was rather scrayed, and frightened to death. The fact that someone was watching her, was only able to stop herself from crying. It is really easy to kill you off. It seems simple, Karen didn't need to deny that. You're not going to give back the blueprints you stole, and my subjects nor beg for forgiveness for your actions towards the City of Sound. If you knew that already, why even bother showing up here? Has your king lost his edge? That is if he ever had one to begin with, Onoki said, still keeping a stern gaze on the Uzumaki. He'd already given his Anbu the order to stand so that they could speak, comfortably. Do you really think that by doing something like this you will gain more allies? Karen didn't wait for a response as she already knew it. The Emperor will not forgive your actions, and instead of gaining new allies, you will lose the ones you already have. This is the Emperor word. I will be coming soon. And when he does get here, it will not be good for you. He will make an example out of you. Onoki snorted, that is if he can, he said. I have fought him and it wasn't for naught, I gained some valuable information about him. My army has been preparing, so he can come here, but I will not let him do as he pleases. Karen shook her head, no wonder the Raikage refuses to join you. Your stubbornness and this arrogance will cost you dearly. I will reiterate what I said in the beginning, the rumors about being smart have been greatly exaggerated, she stood up. If you ever steal one of my babies again, I will kill you with my own hands. The only reprieve I will get over this action, which has reflected badly on me, is that you will be punished. Threatening a cage is a great crime, Uzumaki. Onoki said, comfortably leaning against his big-sized chair. I'm aware of that, Karen shrugged. But your actions had me dragged out from Uzu to deliver this message, and will likely face punishment. I pity you though. Your foolishness and underestimating how much the Emperor stays true to his word will ruin you. That said, Karen walked away from the office. If that man hadn't butt into her busans, she would have never been summoned to the Imperial Palace, and Naruto wouldn't have been displeased with her disobedience. Is he really going to come here? Kuretsuchi asked, standing behind Karen, just outside of Onoki's office. She had been eavesdropping on the conversation just so she couldn't miss anything, even though she already knew the result would be as she predicted. Yes, Karen said. I don't know when, but he will eventually come and punish this village for Onoki's foolishness. There are going to be casualties, and some important people will die. Your people killed hundreds of innocent civilians, the Emperor cannot forgive that. Naruto has killed a lot of people, but innocent civilians. No, I know that, Kuretsuchi said, before adding. He is cruel isn't he? Warning us in time that he will attack brings us nothing but anxiety. Our forces are going to be working overtime to fortify the village in preparation on his invasion. But that is what he wants, just so he can crush us when we are prepared for him. Karen smiled sadly at Kuretsuchi, you're a good person, you know. You love both your grandfather and village. But unlike him, you're not troubled by his stubbornness and mindset. After the past couple of years, you've grown to understand a few things about the Emperor, she paused before adding. Perhaps you should be Tsuchikage instead of your grandfather.